The night Seren left, she took everything with her. Not jewels, not gowns, not the crown she'd worn for 6 months as Queen of Valdris. She took something far more valuable, something the Alpha King didn't even know existed. His heir. She had been standing outside his study door, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, rehearsing the words she would use to tell him. "Calum, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a child." But then she heard the laughter. Her husband's deep voice, rich with amusement, and another voice beneath it, feminine and silken. Ravenna, his mistress. The woman everyone in court knew he visited. The woman Seren had pretended not to notice for months because pretending was easier than breaking. "She follows me around like a lost pup," Calum said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Those hopeful little eyes, as if I could ever want her." "Poor thing," Ravenna purred. "She actually believes you might love her someday." "Love her?" He laughed, and the sound shattered something in Serene's chest. "She was a treaty, a signature. I'd sooner love the chair I sit on." Serene's hand fell from her stomach. The words she'd been rehearsing died in her throat. And in that moment, standing in the darkened corridor with her heart in pieces at her feet, she made a decision. She would not beg. She would not weep. She would not give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd destroyed her. She would simply disappear. By dawn, the Queen's chambers were empty. Her crown sat alone on the vanity, and Seren was gone, carrying the Alpha King's only heir into the unknown. She never looked back. But Calum would spend the rest of his life wishing he had looked closer. The evening had started with hope. Seren had spent an hour preparing herself, choosing a gown the color of moonlight, brushing her dark hair until it gleamed. The healer had confirmed it that morning, 6 weeks along. A miracle she hadn't dared to hope for after months of Calum's coldness, his distant courtesy, his careful avoidance of anything resembling intimacy. But wolves were fertile creatures, and even the few obligatory nights he'd spent in her bed had been enough. She was carrying his child. Their child. And surely, she thought, surely this would change things. A baby would soften him. A baby would give them something to share, something to build upon. Perhaps he didn't love her yet, but love could grow. She had to believe that. The castle corridors were quiet at this hour. Most of the court had retired after dinner, and the servants moved like shadows, unobtrusive and silent. Seren walked toward Calum's private study, where she knew he often worked late into the night. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a mixture of nervousness and fragile hope. She would tell him tonight. She would see his face when he learned he was going to be a father. She rounded the corner and stopped. The study door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the gap. She could hear voices inside, her husband's voice and someone else. A woman. Serene's wolf stirred uneasily within her. She knew she should announce herself. She should knock, enter, and interrupt whatever conversation was taking place. But something held her frozen. Some instinct, some warning prickling at the base of her skull. She stepped closer, silent as a ghost, and listened. "You spoil me, my king." Ravenna's voice was honey and venom, sweet on the surface with something darker beneath. "Another necklace. The courtiers will talk." "Let them talk." Calum sounded relaxed, content. Seren had never heard him sound like that with her. "You deserve beautiful things, Ravenna. You're the only beautiful thing in this entire frozen castle." A soft laugh. "What about your queen? Some say she's quite lovely. Some are blind." The dismissal in his voice was casual, careless. "She's plain. Ordinary. Her father's kingdom had strategic value, nothing more." Seren pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Her legs had gone weak beneath her. Strategic value. That's all she was. All she'd ever been. "She follows me around like a lost pup," Calum continued. "Those hopeful little eyes, as if I could ever want her, as if she could ever compare to you." "Poor thing," Ravenna murmured. "She actually believes you might love her someday." "Love her?" The laugh that followed was cruel, sharp-edged. She was a treaty, a signature. I'd sooner love the chair I sit on. At least the chair doesn't look at me with that desperate, pathetic hope every time I enter a room. Something shattered inside Seren, not her heart. No, her heart had been fracturing slowly for months, crack by crack, slight by slight. This was something else. This was the final piece breaking free, the last thread of hope snapping clean. She stood in the darkness, one hand pressed to her stomach where his child grew, and heard the truth she'd been refusing to accept. He would never love her. He didn't even respect her. She was nothing to him. Less than nothing. Inside the study, Ravenna spoke again. "Will you come to my chambers tonight?" "After I finish these reports," Caleb replied. "Keep the bed warm for me." Seren backed away from the door. Her movements were mechanical, automatic, her body operating on instinct while her mind reeled. She made it around the corner before the first tear fell, hot and silent against her cheek. She wiped it away with trembling fingers. No, she would not cry for him. She would not waste another tear, another hope, another moment on a man who saw her as furniture. Her wolf rose within her, fierce and wounded and furious. For months, that wolf had been quiet, subdued, trying to adapt to this cold mate, this distant husband, this life without warmth. But now it surged forward, demanding action. "Leave," it growled. "Leave now. Take our pup and go." Seren's hand pressed harder against her stomach. Her child would not grow up here, would not grow up watching its mother be humiliated, dismissed, mocked behind closed doors, would not learn that love meant cruelty dressed in silk. She walked back to her chambers in a daze. The moonlight gown she'd chosen with such care now felt like a costume, a lie she'd been wearing for 6 months. Inside her rooms, she moved with quiet purpose. She changed into traveling clothes, dark wool and sturdy boots, practical things she'd brought from her homeland and never had cause to wear. She took her mother's ring from the jewelry box, the only piece that truly mattered. She left the crown on the vanity, gleaming and cold in the candlelight. She wrote no note. What was there to say? He didn't want her. He'd never wanted her. Her absence would be a relief, not a loss. Seren slipped through the servants' corridors, passages she'd learned in her early weeks when she'd wandered the castle alone, desperate for something to fill the emptiness. The guards at the postern gate were drowsy, inattentive. She moved past them like smoke, like a memory already fading. Outside, the night was cold and clear. Stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. She paused at the edge of the forest, looking back at the castle one final time. Its towers pierced the darkness, beautiful and terrible, a prison made of stone. "Goodbye, Caleb," she whispered. Then she turned and walked into the trees, carrying his heir into the unknown. She never looked back. 6 months earlier, Seren had arrived in Valdris with hope in her heart and flowers in her hair. She remembered the journey, the weeks of travel from her father's small kingdom in the southern reaches. Thornhaven, they called it. A modest territory known for its healers, its fertile valleys, its people who could coax life from even the most barren soil. It was not a powerful kingdom, not a wealthy one. But when the Alpha King of Valdris had sent word that he sought a bride from the bloodlines of the old families, Seren's father had seen an opportunity. "The king needs an alliance," her father had explained, his weathered face creased with cautious hope. "Valdris controls the northern trade routes, but they've been weakened by border conflicts. They need what we have: healers, grain, stability." "And he wants to marry me?" Seren had asked, disbelieving. "He wants to marry someone, you're of age, unmarried, from a respected line." Her father had taken her hands, his grip warm and reassuring. "This could be a great thing, Seren, not just for our kingdom, but for you. A chance at a life beyond these small borders." She had wanted to believe him. She had wanted to believe that this strange, distant king might see something in her worth loving. that she might build a life in his frozen northern kingdom, raise children, find purpose. So she had traveled north with her modest dowry and her mother's ring and her foolish, innocent hope. The wedding had been grand and cold, much like the groom himself. Seren remembered standing at the altar, her hands trembling slightly as she looked up at Kalum for the first time. He was beautiful. That was undeniable. Tall and broad-shouldered, with hair the color of winter wheat and eyes like pale amber, sharp and unreadable. His wolf's presence radiated power, the kind of dominance that made lesser wolves want to bare their throats in submission. She had expected coldness. The north was cold. Its king would be too. But she had not expected the way he looked through her, as if she were made of glass, transparent and unimportant. "I take you as my wife," he had said, the words formal and empty. "I take you as my husband," she had replied, her voice steadier than her heart. And that had been the extent of their connection. The first weeks had been the hardest. Seren had tried everything she could think of to reach him. She attended every meal, sitting at his side in the great hall, attempting conversation that he deflected with monosyllables. She asked about his kingdom, his work, his childhood. He answered in the fewest possible words, his attention always elsewhere. She visited him in his study, bringing tea, bringing small gifts from her homeland. He accepted them with polite indifference and returned to his documents. She dressed beautifully, styled her hair in the northern fashion, and learned the customs of his court. He never seemed to notice, and then she learned about Ravenna. The whispers reached her within the first month. The king's mistress, a nobleman's daughter who had warmed his bed for years, long before any talk of marriage. A woman he actually wanted. Seren had pretended not to hear, pretended not to see the way Ravenna looked at her with barely concealed triumph, pretended not to notice when Kalum disappeared in the evenings, returning to their chambers, the few times he came at all, smelling of another woman's perfume. She had told herself it would change, told herself he needed time to adjust, to see her true worth. Told herself that if she was patient, kind, devoted, he would eventually turn toward her instead of away. But hope was a fragile thing, and Kalum had crushed it without even noticing. What he didn't know, what no one in Valdris knew, was that Seren was not as ordinary as she appeared. The healers of Thornhaven were renowned throughout the southern kingdoms, but Seren's abilities went beyond ordinary healing. Her mother had possessed the old gift, the rare magic that surfaced once in a generation. The ability to heal not just wounds but curses. To purify poisoned bloodlines. To restore what dark magic had corrupted. It was a dangerous gift, one her mother had warned her to keep hidden. "The powerful will want to use you," her mother had said, just weeks before the wasting sickness took her. "They'll see you as a tool, not a person. Promise me, Seren. Promise me you'll only reveal your gift to someone who truly loves you. Someone who sees your worth beyond what you can give them." Seren had promised, and so she had come to Valdris with her gift buried deep, waiting for the husband who would never love her to prove himself worthy of her trust. He never had. Now, walking through the dark forest with his child growing inside her, Seren touched her mother's ring and made a new promise. Her child would know its worth. Would know it was loved completely, unconditionally. Would never doubt for a single moment that it mattered. She walked through the night, guided by starlight and instinct, heading south toward the border. She had relatives in the eastern valleys, distant cousins who would take her in, ask no questions. She would rebuild. She would survive. She would raise this child alone if she had to. And Kalum would never know what he'd lost. Not just a wife, not just an heir, but the only person in the world who could have saved him from the darkness that was coming. Kalum woke to silence. That wasn't unusual. His chambers were always quiet, the thick stone walls blocking out the sounds of the castle. But this silence felt different somehow. Heavier. Emptier. He rose, dressed without assistance as he preferred, and made his way to breakfast. The great hall was already filling with courtiers. the usual buzz of morning conversation humming beneath the vaulted ceiling. His seat at the head of the table was ready. The seat beside it, the queen's seat, was empty. "Where is my wife?" he asked the nearest servant. The young man blanched. I don't know, Your Majesty. Her chambers." "What about her chambers?" The maid said. "They said she wasn't there this morning. Her bed wasn't slept in." Calum frowned. It was unlike Seren to miss a meal. She was nothing if not dutiful, appearing at every function, sitting beside him with that quiet, hopeful expression that always made him feel vaguely uncomfortable. "Find her," he ordered. An hour later, the captain of his guard stood before him with a face carved from stone. "Your Majesty, the queen is gone." "Gone?" Calum repeated. "What do you mean, gone?" "Her traveling clothes are missing. Her mother's ring. The crown was left on her vanity." The captain hesitated. "The Eastern Gate guards admit there may have been a lapse in their attention last night." Something cold settled in Calum's chest. She left? In the middle of the night? Alone? "It appears so, Your Majesty." He stood so abruptly that his chair scraped against the stone floor. "That's impossible. Why would she leave? Where would she go?" The captain had no answers. Calum strode to the queen's chambers himself, pushing past servants and guards. The rooms were exactly as the captain had described. Bed neatly made, untouched. Wardrobe open, a few practical items missing. Jewelry box still full of everything he'd given her. But there, on the vanity, sat the crown. Delicate silver, set with moonstones. He'd chosen it himself, had it made specifically for her coronation. She'd left it behind like it meant nothing. Because it did mean nothing, a voice whispered in his mind. "You made sure of that." He picked up the crown, turning it over in his hands. His reflection stared back at him from the polished silver, distorted and strange. When had he last spoken to her? Really spoken to her? Not just the empty courtesies he offered at meals? He couldn't remember. Days, perhaps. A week or more. What had he said the last time they were alone together? He couldn't remember that either. "Your Majesty." A servant appeared in the doorway, pale and nervous. "Lady Ravenna requests an audience." "Not now," Calum growled. "She says it's urgent, regarding the queen." He went cold. "Send her in." Ravenna swept into the room moments later, beautiful as always in a gown of deep crimson, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders. But her expression was troubled, her scent carrying notes of concern that seemed almost too perfect. "My king," she said softly. "I heard about Seren. I had to come." "What do you know about this?" "I know she was unhappy." Ravenna moved closer, her hand reaching out to rest on his arm. "She came to me last week, crying, saying she couldn't bear it anymore." "Bear what?" "This life. This marriage." Ravenna's eyes glistened with what looked like sympathy. "She said she wanted to go home, that she never should have come here in the first place." I tried to comfort her, but... She shook her head sadly. "I'm not surprised she left, Calum, only that it took her this long." Something about Ravenna's words didn't sit right. Seren had seemed quiet lately, yes, withdrawn. But she had never stopped trying to connect with him. Never stopped appearing at meals, asking about his day, offering those small smiles that he'd learned to ignore. Had she really been so miserable? Had he really been so blind? "She left no note," he said slowly. "No explanation. Perhaps she didn't think you'd care." Ravenna's voice was gentle, but the words cut deep. "You've never been warm with her, my king." She must have felt unwanted. Unwanted. The word echoed in his mind. "I need to find her," he said, the decision crystallizing suddenly. "Send out search parties. Alert the border guards. She can't have gotten far." Ravenna's expression flickered, so briefly he almost missed it. Something that looked almost like alarm. "Is that wise? If she wants to leave?" "She's my wife. My queen. I can't simply let her disappear." "Of course." Ravenna recovered smoothly, her smile returning. I only meant, perhaps give her time, space. Let her realize she's made a mistake. But Caleb was no longer listening. He strode out of the chamber, shouting orders to his guard, his mind racing. Why did it matter so much? He'd never wanted this marriage, never wanted her. She was a treaty, a signature, exactly as he'd said. So why did her absence feel like a wound? He was halfway to the stables when his steward intercepted him, breathless and pale. Your Majesty, the royal healer. He says he must speak with you immediately. He says it concerns the Queen. Caleb followed the steward to the healing wing, where old Brennan waited with grave eyes and trembling hands. Your Majesty. The healer bowed deeply. I debated whether to speak, but given the circumstances, speak plainly. Brennan swallowed hard. The Queen came to see me yesterday morning. She asked me to confirm something for her, something she suspected. What? The healer met his eyes, and Caleb saw something there that looked almost like accusation. The Queen is pregnant, Your Majesty. 6 weeks along. She's carrying your heir. The world tilted. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And she had left him anyway. Left knowing she carried his child. Left without telling him, without giving him a chance to... To what? To mock her some more? To dismiss her again? To prove once more that she meant nothing to him? The memory hit him like a physical blow. Last night, his study. Ravenna laughing at something he'd said. What had he said? She follows me around like a lost pup, those hopeful little eyes. She was a treaty, a signature. I'd sooner love the chair I sit on. Had Seren heard? Had she been standing outside that door, listening to him tear her apart, while she carried his child inside her? The crown on the vanity, the empty chambers, the silence where her presence should have been. What had he done? Find her, he snarled at his captain. Find her now. But even as the words left his mouth, Caleb knew the terrible truth. She was gone, and he had no one to blame but himself. 3 weeks later, Seren stood in a sunlit kitchen, her hands covered in flour, watching her cousin's children chase each other around the garden. The eastern valleys of Thornhaven were nothing like Valdres. Where the north had been all stone and ice and shadows, this place was warmth and green and life. The cottage her cousins Marin and Doran had offered her was small but clean, nestled at the edge of a village so tiny it barely appeared on maps. Perfect for disappearing. You're sure no one will come looking? Seren had asked when she first arrived, exhausted from weeks of travel, her feet blistered and her heart hollow. Marin had wrapped her in a fierce embrace. Let them look. They'll find nothing here but farmers and sheep. You're safe, cousin. You and the little one. Safe. The word felt foreign on Seren's tongue. She hadn't felt safe in months, perhaps years, but slowly, day by day, she was beginning to believe it. Her pregnancy was progressing well. The village midwife, a gentlewoman named Isolde, had examined her and declared both mother and child healthy. The sickness that had plagued her first weeks had faded, replaced by a growing appetite and a fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. This child would be loved, would be wanted, would never doubt its worth. That was the promise she made every morning when she woke, and every night when she slept. Some nights, she dreamed of Caleb, of his cold amber eyes, his dismissive voice, the cruel laughter she'd heard through that study door. She would wake with tears on her cheeks and fury in her chest, and she would press her hands to her growing belly and remind herself why she'd left. He didn't deserve to know this child. He didn't deserve her. But other nights, worse nights, she dreamed of something else. Of the brief moments when he'd seemed almost human, the way he'd looked at her during their wedding ceremony, a flicker of something she'd mistaken for interest. The few nights he'd come to her chambers, silent and dutiful, but not unkind. The time she'd found him in the library at midnight, surrounded by books, looking more like a scholar than a king, and he'd almost smiled when she'd brought him tea. Those dreams hurt more than the cruel ones. because they reminded her of what she'd hoped for, what she'd believed possible, what had never been real. Seren? Marin appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression curious. There's someone here to see you. Seren's heart seized. Who? A traveler. Says she knew your mother. She dried her hands on her apron and followed Marin to the cottage's main room, where an elderly woman sat by the fire. Her hair was silver white, her face deeply lined, but her eyes were sharp and knowing. She wore the robes of a healer, the old kind, and the traditional garments that marked practitioners of the ancient arts. You're Seren, the woman said. It wasn't a question. I am. I'm Morwen. I trained with your mother many years ago. The old healer's gaze traveled over Seren slowly, assessing. You have her look. And her gift, I suspect. Seren went still. I don't know what you mean. Child? Morwen's voice was gentle but firm. I can sense it in you. The old power, the purifying light. Your mother had it too, though she hid it well. She leaned forward. You can't hide it forever. Not now. Not with what's coming. What's coming? The old woman's expression darkened. There's a shadow over the northern kingdoms, a curse that's been building for years, poisoning the bloodlines of the great houses, your husband's house most of all. Seren's blood ran cold. My husband is not my concern anymore. Perhaps not, but his kingdom is suffering, child. His people are suffering, and soon, the suffering will spread south. Morwen reached out, her gnarled fingers closing around Seren's wrist. You're the only one who can stop it. The only healer left with the gift strong enough to purify what's been corrupted. You're wrong. Seren pulled away. I'm not going back there. I won't. Then the darkness wins. Morwen stood slowly, her joints creaking. Think on what I've said, child. Your mother died protecting her gift. Will you let her sacrifice mean nothing? She left without another word, disappearing down the road like a ghost. Seren stood in the doorway watching her go, one hand pressed protectively over her belly. A curse, a shadow, suffering that would spread. It wasn't her problem. Caleb had made it clear she meant nothing to him. Why should she risk herself, risk her child, to save a kingdom that had never wanted her? But even as she told herself this, her mother's voice echoed in her memory. The gift isn't for us, Seren. It's for others. That's the burden we carry. In Valdris, the burden Caleb carried was growing heavier by the day. 3 weeks of searching had yielded nothing. His scouts had combed the northern territories, questioned travelers, offered rewards for information. The Queen of Valdris had vanished like morning mist, leaving no trace behind. But it wasn't just Seren's absence that haunted him. It was the creeping wrongness he felt in his own bones. He'd always been cold. That was his nature, his inheritance from a long line of northern kings. But lately the coldness had deepened into something else, something that felt like illness, like decay, like a frost settling into his marrow that no fire could thaw. His temper had grown shorter, his sleep had grown more troubled. Some mornings he woke with ice crusted on his windowsill despite the fires burning all night in his chambers. And the dreams. Gods, the dreams. Shadows with teeth. Darkness that spoke his name. A woman's laughter, cold and triumphant, echoing through halls that crumbled to dust around him. You're working too hard, Ravenna said, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. They were in her chambers again, though he couldn't quite remember coming here. You need rest, my king. I need to find her. Why? Ravenna's voice sharpened just for a moment before softening again. She left you, Caleb. She chose to leave. Why waste your energy on someone who clearly doesn't want to be found? She's carrying my heir. So she claims. But can you be certain? She was always so quiet, so secretive. How do you know the child is even yours? The suggestion hit him like a slap. What are you implying? Nothing. Nothing. Ravenna's hand moved soothingly over his arm. I only meant, you barely knew her. She could have been hiding anything. Anyone. The words burrowed into his mind like worms. Could it be true? Had Seren been unfaithful? Had she run away, not because of his cruelty, but because she carried another man's child? No. Something in him rejected the idea immediately, instinctively. Seren had been many things. Quiet, patient, hopeful to the point of naivety. But she had not been deceptive. He would have smelled it on her, would have sensed the lie in her scent. "I need air," he said, pulling away from Ravenna. Her expression flickered again, that strange shadow he kept glimpsing but couldn't quite name. "Of course, my king. I'll be here when you return." He walked through the castle corridors, past servants who bowed and guards who saluted, feeling more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. And then he stopped. Outside Seren's old chambers, his feet had carried him there without conscious thought. The door was closed, the rooms untouched since her departure, preserved exactly as she'd left them. He pushed it open. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating the empty vanity where her crown still sat. The air smelled faintly of her, that soft floral scent he'd never consciously noticed until it was gone. His eye caught something on the floor, half hidden beneath the wardrobe. A small book, leather-bound, the kind used for personal journals. He picked it up and opened it to a random page. The handwriting was Serene's, neat and careful. He looked at me today. Actually looked at me, not through me. For just a moment I thought I saw something in his eyes. Something warm. But then it was gone, and he turned away. And I was alone again. I keep hoping. I can't seem to stop. Mother always said hope was my greatest weakness. Perhaps she was right. Calem's hands trembled as he turned more pages. The mistress watches me with such hatred. I pretend not to see. What good would confrontation do? He's chosen her. He's always chosen her. I'm just the treaty wife, the signature, the necessary inconvenience. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder what it would take to make him see me. Really see me. And then, near the end, an entry that made his blood run cold. I went to the healer today. My suspicions were confirmed. I'm carrying his child. Our child. I should be overjoyed. Instead, I'm terrified. Because I know that even this won't be enough. Even a baby won't make him love me. And I don't know how much longer I can survive being invisible to the man I married. The journal fell from his nerveless fingers. She had loved him. Despite everything, despite his coldness, his neglect, his cruelty, she had loved him. And he had destroyed her. 2 months passed. In the eastern valleys, Seren's belly grew round and full, her child quickening inside her. She felt the first kicks on a warm spring morning, tiny flutters that made her laugh and cry at the same time. She had built a life here, a small life, simple and quiet, but hers. She helped Marin with the children, assisted Isolde with village births, and gathered herbs in the meadows. The villagers had accepted her without question, this quiet woman with sad eyes and gentle hands who had appeared from nowhere and asked for nothing but peace. But peace, she was learning, was harder to keep than she'd imagined. The old healer's words haunted her. A curse, a shadow, suffering that would spread. And then the sickness came to the village. It started with the children. Fevers that wouldn't break, a strange pallor that made their skin look almost gray. The village healer tried everything, herbs and poultices and prayers, but nothing worked. "I've never seen anything like it," Isolde confessed, her face lined with exhaustion and fear. "It's as if something is draining the life out of them." Seren looked at the children lying in their beds, their small bodies struggling, and felt her mother's gift stirring inside her. She could help. She could heal them. But to do so would mean revealing herself, would mean risking discovery. Could she live with herself if she let them die? The answer came when Marin's youngest, a bright-eyed girl named Petra, fell ill. Seren sat by her bedside all night, watching the child's labored breathing, feeling the wrongness radiating from her small body. This was no ordinary sickness. This was corruption. Dark magic seeping into innocent flesh, the shadow Morwen had warned about. "I'm sorry, Mother," Seren whispered. "I can't stay hidden any longer." She placed her hands on Petra's chest and opened herself to the gift she'd suppressed for years. Light poured through her, golden and warm, flooding into the child's body. She felt the corruption recoil, felt it shriek and writhe as her power burned it away. It was like pulling poison from a wound, agonizing and exhausting, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. When it was over, Petra's breathing had eased. Color was returning to her cheeks. The gray pallor was gone. Seren collapsed beside the bed, drained but triumphant. "What? What did you do?" Maren stood in the doorway, her face pale with shock. "I healed her." Seren's voice was barely a whisper. "It's my gift. My mother's gift. I can purify what's been corrupted." Word spread through the village like wildfire. Within days, Seren had healed every affected child. Within weeks, people were traveling from neighboring villages, bringing their sick, their cursed, and their desperate. She turned no one away. But with each healing, the corruption she encountered grew stronger, more familiar, as if it came from a single source, a single darkness, spreading outward like poison in a stream. "It's getting worse," she told Morwen, who had returned as if she'd known she would be needed. "The curse, it's growing." "Because its source still lives." The old healer's eyes were grave. "The shadow at the heart of Valdris. It feeds on the king's bloodline, and it won't stop until it's consumed everything." "The king's bloodline?" Seren's hand went to her belly. "But my child is protected. For now. Your gift shields the babe inside you." Morwen leaned closer. "But once the child is born, once it enters the world separate from your body, the curse will seek it out. The heir of Valdris, the purest blood, the greatest prize." Horror washed through Seren. "How do I stop it?" "You must destroy the source, the one who cast the curse." Morwen's voice dropped to a whisper. "The one who has been feeding it for years, growing its power, using it to corrupt the king himself." "Who?" "I don't know her true name, but she wears the face of beauty and speaks with honeyed lies. She has been at the king's side for years, whispering poison into his ear, turning his heart to ice, preparing him for destruction." Ravenna. The realization hit Seren like a physical blow. Ravenna was the source. Ravenna had been cursing Calum all along, turning him cold, driving them apart, and ensuring that no love could survive between them. Everything Seren had suffered, every cruel word Calum had spoken, every moment of heartbreak and humiliation, it had all been engineered. She hadn't lost her husband to indifference. She had lost him to dark magic. "I have to go back," Seren breathed. "You do?" Morwen nodded slowly. "But you cannot go alone. The witch is powerful, and you are with child. You need allies." "I don't have allies. I have no one." "You have your gift. You have your courage." The old healer smiled grimly. "And you have something the witch doesn't expect. You have the truth. The king has been searching for you, child. His men have been combing every kingdom, offering fortunes for information about the lost queen. Whatever lies the witch has told him, some part of him still seeks you. He doesn't love me. He made that clear. He spoke words that weren't his own. The curse had already taken root in his heart." Morwen gripped Seren's hands. "But you can purify him. You can burn the corruption away, and show him who he truly is beneath the ice. The question is, will you risk everything to try?" Seren thought of Calum's cold eyes, his cruel laughter, the words that had shattered her heart. She was a treaty, a signature. He'd sooner love the chair he sat on. But she also thought of the man in the library, surrounded by books, almost smiling when she brought him tea. The brief moments of warmth she'd glimpsed before the coldness swallowed them. Had that been the real Calum? The man beneath the curse? Could she save him? Did he deserve to be saved? I'll go, she said finally. But not for him. For my child. For the innocent people being consumed by this darkness. For the kingdom that will fall if someone doesn't stop it. And if saving the kingdom means saving the king? Siren's jaw tightened. Then I'll save him. But he'll have to earn my forgiveness. And he'll have to prove that the man I married actually exists. Far to the north, in the frozen halls of Valdres, Ravenna stood before a mirror that showed no reflection. She's coming. A voice hissed from the darkness within the glass. The healer queen. She's discovered the truth. Let her come. Ravenna smiled, her beautiful face twisted with malice. She's too late. The curse has taken root. The king is mine, and by the next full moon, his transformation will be complete. He'll be nothing but a puppet of ice and shadow, a vessel for our master's will. And the heir? The child she carries? Will be ours as well. Ravenna's hand pressed against the mirror's surface. The purest blood of Valdres, born with the corruption already inside it, a perfect weapon, a perfect host. The darkness in the mirror laughed cold and triumphant. The queen thinks she can save them, it whispered. Let her try. Her hope will make her destruction all the sweeter. The transformation in Calum had become impossible to ignore. His servants whispered about the frost that crept along his chamber walls despite roaring fires. His guards exchanged worried glances when his eyes seemed to flash with unnatural cold during moments of anger. Even the courtiers, usually so careful to maintain their masks, couldn't hide their unease. The king was changing, and not for the better. You're imagining things, Ravenna assured him, her fingers trailing through his hair as he sat slumped in his chair, exhausted from another sleepless night. The stress of the search, the loss of your queen, it's taking its toll, that's all. Something is wrong with me. His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar even to his own ears. I feel it inside me, like ice in my veins, like a shadow wrapped around my heart. You've always been cold, my king. It's your nature. Not like this. He pulled away from her touch, and for a moment, for just a moment, he saw something in her eyes, something that looked almost like hunger. I need the healers. I need someone to examine me. The healers know nothing. A flash of irritation crossed Ravenna's face before she smoothed it away. What you need is rest. What you need is to stop this foolish search for a woman who clearly doesn't want to be found. She's carrying my heir. So the healer claimed. But Brennan is old. His mind wanders. How can you trust his diagnosis? Calum frowned. He'd been finding it harder and harder to think clearly lately. His thoughts felt sluggish, wrapped in fog, frozen at the edges. But somewhere beneath the ice, something stirred. Something that remembered. Brennan had served his family for 40 years, had delivered Calum himself, had tended to his mother in her final illness, and had never once been wrong in his assessments. Why was Ravenna so determined to discredit him? I want to see the court physician, Calum said, rising from his chair. The new one, from the Eastern Territories. I've heard he has unconventional methods. Ravenna's composure cracked just for an instant. That won't be necessary. I'll decide what's necessary. He turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time in weeks. She was beautiful, as always. But there was something beneath the beauty now. Something he'd never noticed before. A sharpness in her smile, a coldness in her eyes that rivaled his own. You've been very attentive lately, Ravenna. Very eager to keep me close, to keep me from seeking help. I only want what's best for you, my king. Do you? He stepped closer and she stepped back. Fear flickered across her face. Strange, because lately I've begun to wonder if you want anything at all except my throne. Calum, you're not yourself. The strain? No. He cut her off, his voice hardening. I'm not myself. That much is true. But I'm beginning to think I haven't been myself for a very long time. He strode from the room before she could respond, his mind clearer than it had been in months. The fog was still there, the ice still creeping through his veins, but something had broken through. A crack in the frozen wall that surrounded his thoughts. Suspicion. He found his steward in the great hall and issued orders. Bring me everything we have on Lady Ravenna, her family history, her connections, her activities before she came to court, and do it quietly. I don't want her to know. Your Majesty? The steward looked confused but bowed. It will be done. One more thing. Calum paused. The reports of a healer in the eastern valleys, the one who's been performing miraculous cures. I want to know more about her. I want to know everything. The reports arrived 3 days later. Calum read them in the privacy of his study, the door barred, the windows shuttered. What he found made his blood run cold, colder even than the curse that gripped him. Ravenna was not who she claimed to be. Her family had not been minor nobility from the western mountains, as she'd said. Her family had been practitioners of the dark arts, a coven destroyed 20 years ago by Calum's own father for attempting to curse the royal bloodline. A coven that had sworn vengeance with their dying breaths. And Ravenna, the sole survivor, had spent years working her way into the king's confidence, into his bed, into position to exact her revenge. The dates aligned perfectly. Calum had met Ravenna 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the coldness had begun. 5 years of gradual freezing, of his emotions numbing, of his heart turning to ice. She had been cursing him the entire time. And the things he'd said about Seren, the cruelty, the mockery, the dismissal of his own wife as less than furniture, had those words even been his own? Or had they been the curse speaking through him, driving away the one person who might have saved him? His hands shook as he reached for the second report. The one about the healer in the east. A woman calling herself Sarah has been performing miraculous cures in the valley villages. She appears to be with child. Witnesses describe her as dark-haired, soft-spoken, with a gift for purifying curses and corrupted bloodlines. Several who have seen her claim she bears a striking resemblance to the missing Queen of Valdris. Seren. She was alive. She was pregnant. And she possessed the one gift that could save him. Calum pressed his hands against his eyes, fighting back emotions he'd thought himself incapable of feeling. Relief. Hope. And beneath them, crushing and terrible guilt. He had driven her away. Curse or no curse, he had spoken those words. He had made her feel worthless. He had broken her heart while she carried his child. And she had still survived. Had still found a way to use her gift. Was still healing others, even in hiding. She was stronger than he'd ever realized. And he had to find her. Had to warn her. Because if Ravenna knew about Seren's gift, if she knew about the child... A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Your Majesty. The steward's voice was urgent. Lady Ravenna is gone. She left the castle an hour ago with a company of hired men. The guards say she was heading east. East. Toward Seren. Calum rose, the ice in his veins momentarily forgotten, replaced by something hotter. Something that felt almost like the man he'd been before the curse took hold. Ready my horse, he commanded. And my best warriors. We ride within the hour. Your Majesty, in your condition. I'll be in worse condition if I stay here and let that witch reach my wife before I do. He grabbed his sword from the wall, the weight familiar and reassuring in his hand. Seren left because I was a monster. But she's carrying my child, and Ravenna wants to destroy them both. Whatever I have to do, whatever it costs me, I will not let that happen. He paused at the door, his next words quiet but fierce. I may not deserve her forgiveness, but I can still protect her. And if there's any chance at all, that she can break this curse and show me who I really am beneath the ice. He drew a shuddering breath. Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning back what I destroyed. Miles away, in the eastern valleys, Seren woke from a nightmare with a scream trapped in her throat. She had seen Ravenna's face in her dreams, had seen the darkness behind those beautiful features, the centuries of hatred burning in those cold eyes, and she had seen something else. Calum, frozen solid in a throne of ice, his eyes empty, his heart stopped, a puppet of shadow with no soul left inside. "She's coming," Seren whispered into the darkness, her hands pressed to her belly where her child kicked in distress. "She knows where I am." The race had begun, and only one of them would survive it. Seren had one day to prepare. Morwen's scrying had shown Ravenna's company moving fast, cutting through the mountain passes that would bring them to the valley by nightfall tomorrow. 20 men, armed and dangerous, led by a witch whose power had been growing for years. "You should run," Marin urged, her face pale with fear. "Take the southern road, disappear again." "I can't run forever." Seren stood at the cottage window, watching the sun set over the peaceful valley that had become her sanctuary. "And I won't let her bring this darkness here. These people took me in, protected me. I won't repay them by leading destruction to their doorstep." "Then what will you do?" "I'll face her." Seren's hand rested on her belly, feeling her child move beneath her palm. "I'll end this." She spent the night preparing. Morwen taught her focusing techniques, ways to channel her gift into a concentrated burst rather than the gentle healing she'd practiced. Isolde provided herbs that would strengthen her body and protect the baby during the confrontation. And in the quiet hours before dawn, Seren sat alone by the fire and thought about Calum. She had loved him. Despite everything, despite the coldness and the cruelty, some part of her had loved the man she'd glimpsed beneath the ice, the scholar in the library, the king who'd looked almost lost sometimes, as if he couldn't understand why warmth never reached him. Now she knew why. He had been cursed, corrupted. The cruelty hadn't been him, not really. Ravenna had been poisoning him for 5 years, turning his heart to frost, ensuring he could never connect with anyone who might save him. But understanding didn't erase the pain. The words she'd overheard still echoed in her memory, still cut like frozen blades. Even if the curse had twisted his thoughts, he had still spoken them. Had still laughed while she stood in the darkness with his child growing inside her. Could she forgive that? Could she separate the man from the monster the curse had made him? She didn't know. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let Ravenna win. The attack came at dusk. Seren had sent the villagers into the hills, keeping only Morwen and a handful of volunteers who refused to leave her side. They waited at the edge of the valley, where the mountain road emerged from the trees, watching the shadows lengthen. And then, they appeared. 20 men in dark armor, their eyes glazed with enchantment, their movements eerily synchronized. At their head rode Ravenna, no longer bothering to wear her mask of beauty. Her face was twisted with malice, her eyes burning with dark fire, her hair whipping around her in an unnatural wind. "Little Queen!" she called out, her voice carrying across the distance like a blade. "Did you think you could hide from me forever?" Seren stepped forward, her hands steady despite the terror thundering in her chest. "I'm done hiding." Ravenna laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "So brave, so foolish. Do you have any idea what you're facing? I've spent 5 years building this curse, feeding it with the king's bloodline, preparing him to become my master's vessel. And 20 years before that, planning my revenge after the old king destroyed my family." Her eyes blazed with hatred. "You think you can stop me with your little healing tricks? I think I can try." "Then you'll die trying." Ravenna raised her hand, darkness coiling around her fingers. "And your child will be mine. The heir of Valdris, born with corruption already in its veins. The perfect weapon to complete what my family started." She hurled the darkness forward. Seren raised her hands and met it with light. The collision was catastrophic. Energy exploded outward, flattening trees, sending men flying. Seren staggered but held her ground, pouring everything she had into the barrier of golden fire that kept the darkness at bay. But Ravenna was strong, stronger than Seren had imagined. The darkness pushed harder, cracking the light, seeping through the gaps. You can't win, Ravenna hissed. You're fighting for a man who mocked you, a kingdom that never wanted you. Why sacrifice yourself for people who see you as nothing? Because that's what my gift is for. Serene's voice was strained but fierce. Not for me, for others. That's the burden I carry. She pushed back with everything she had, and for a moment, just a moment, she thought she might win. Then the arrow struck her shoulder. Pain exploded through her body. Serene screamed, her concentration shattering, her light flickering and dying. She fell to her knees, clutching the shaft that protruded from her flesh, feeling blood soak through her dress. Ravenna's laughter rang through the valley. Did you forget about my men? So focused on the magical threat that you ignored the mundane one. How disappointingly human of you. She approached slowly, savoring her victory, darkness swirling around her like a cloak. I'm going to enjoy this, she whispered, reaching down to grip Serene's chin. The great healer queen, bleeding in the dirt, your child will be cut from your dying body and raised to serve our master. And Calum, she smiled. Calum will never know. He'll spend the rest of his frozen existence believing you abandoned him, that you never cared, that the child he's been searching for never existed at all. Serene spat blood in her face. He's already searching, she gasped. He knows what you are. He's coming for you. Ravenna's expression flickered. You're lying. Am I? Serene managed a bloody smile. You should have killed him when you had the chance. Instead, you played with your food, and now he's figured it out. For the first time, uncertainty crossed the witch's face, and then a horn sounded from the mountain pass. Ravenna spun, her eyes widening as riders poured from the trees, dozens of them, bearing the banner of Valdris, led by a figure in armor that gleamed like frost in the dying light. Calum. He had come. The battle was chaos. Calum's warriors crashed into Ravenna's enchanted soldiers, steel ringing against steel. But Calum himself rode straight for the witch, his sword blazing with a cold fire that seemed to burn the very air. You! Ravenna snarled, abandoning Serene to face this new threat. How did you break free of my influence? You got greedy. Calum dismounted, stalking toward her with murder in his eyes. You pushed too hard, too fast, and you made a mistake. You made me drive away the one person who might have saved me, but she didn't just give up. She survived. She healed others. And when I heard about a healer in the East with the power to purify curses, he smiled grimly. I knew. I knew it was her. And I knew you would come for her. You can't defeat me. The curse still holds you. You're still mine. Maybe. Calum raised his sword. But I can slow you down long enough for her to finish what she started. He attacked. The fight was brutal. Ravenna's dark magic clashed against Calum's frozen strength, neither able to gain the upper hand. But Serene could see the truth. The curse was draining Calum with every moment. Ice was spreading across his skin, slowing his movements, freezing him from the inside out. He was dying, killing himself to protect her. No, Serene whispered. She gripped the arrow in her shoulder and pulled. The pain was blinding. White-hot agony that nearly sent her into unconsciousness. But she held on. Held on because Calum was fighting for her. Because her child needed her. Because she was the only one who could end this. She pressed her hand to the wound and healed it, burning through her reserves, feeling her gift flare and dim and flare again. Then she stood. Ravenna. The witch turned, shock written across her features. Impossible. You should be dying. I'm full of surprises. Serene walked forward, golden light building around her hands. You've spent 5 years building your curse, feeding it, growing it, but you forgot something important. What? Fire melts ice. Serene's eyes blazed. And love burns brighter than hate. She released everything she had. The light exploded outward in a wave of purifying fire, golden and brilliant and absolutely devastating. It washed over the battlefield, burning away enchantments, freeing Ravenna's soldiers from their magical bondage, and it struck Ravenna full in the chest. The witch screamed. Her darkness writhed, fighting against the light, but it was no match for years of suppressed power finally unleashed. The corruption burned away layer by layer, the curse unraveling, the shadows dissolving into nothing. Ravenna aged before their eyes. 20 years of stolen life drained away in seconds, leaving behind a withered husk that crumbled to dust. And then it was over. Seren collapsed, her vision swimming, her body utterly spent. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Calem's face above her. His eyes wide with terror, his hands gentle as he caught her falling body. "Seren," he breathed. "Stay with me, please. Stay with me." But consciousness was already slipping away, and Seren tumbled into the void, uncertain if she would ever wake again. She dreamed of warmth. For so long her dreams had been cold, frozen castles and icy eyes and words that cut like winter wind. But now there was warmth. Gentle heat surrounding her, seeping into her bones, thawing the places that had been frozen for so long. And a voice. A familiar voice, rough with emotion, speaking words she'd never expected to hear. "I'm sorry. God, Seren. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand what she was doing to me. The things I said, the way I treated you, I would take it all back if I could. Every cold word, every dismissal, every moment I made you feel worthless." A hand holding hers, warm now, not cold. Fingers intertwined with her own, gripping tight as if afraid she might disappear. "Please wake up. Please give me a chance to make this right. I know I don't deserve it. I know I destroyed everything good between us before it could even begin. But our child deserves to know both parents, deserves to grow up loved. And I swear, Seren, I swear on everything I am, if you wake up, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you hoped I was." Seren opened her eyes. She was in a bed, soft and warm, in a room she didn't recognize. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of gold. And beside her, looking haggard and exhausted and more human than she'd ever seen him, sat Calem. His hair was disheveled, his armor was gone, replaced by simple clothes. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his cheeks were rough with stubble. He looked terrible. He looked beautiful. "You're awake." His voice cracked. "Thank the gods. You're awake. How long?" Her own voice was a rasp, her throat dry and scratchy. 3 days. He reached for a cup of water, helping her drink. "The healers weren't sure you would survive. The amount of power you channeled, the wound you healed. While pregnant?" He shook his head. "They said it should have killed you. The baby? Safe." His hand moved to rest gently on her belly, and Seren felt her child kick against his palm. Strong, like its mother. The healers say everything is perfect. Relief washed through her, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She'd risked everything, and somehow, miraculously, they had both survived. "Ravenna?" she asked. "Gone, destroyed completely, along with her curse." Calem's expression darkened. "Her men have been freed from enchantment. Most of them didn't even know what they were doing. She'd been controlling them for months." "And you?" Seren studied his face, looking for the coldness that had haunted him for so long. "The curse was rooted in you, in your bloodline. Broken." He met her eyes, and she saw something there she'd never seen before. Warmth. True warmth. Unguarded and vulnerable. "I can feel it. The ice is gone. For the first time in 5 years, I feel warm." He laughed, a sound tinged with wonder and disbelief. "I didn't even realize how cold I'd become until it stopped. It was so gradual, so insidious. Every year, a little more frozen, a little more distant. By the time you arrived, I was barely human anymore. Just ice and duty and emptiness. The things you said, Seren couldn't help it. The memory still hurt. That night, with Ravenna, you called me a treaty, a signature. Pain twisted Calem's features. I know. I remember every word, and I can't tell you how much I wish I could take them back. He gripped her hand tighter. The curse twisted everything. My thoughts, my emotions, my perceptions. When I looked at you, I couldn't see your kindness, your beauty, your worth. All I could see was nothing, just emptiness where you should have been. But some part of you knew. Seren thought of the journal he must have found by now. Some part of you was still fighting. Yes. He nodded slowly. The library. The nights I came to your chambers even when I didn't know why. The tea you brought me. The way I almost smiled. His voice dropped. Those moments were real. Those were me, breaking through, reaching for you before the curse dragged me back under. Seren was silent for a long moment, processing everything. The truth about the curse. The revelation that the cruelty hadn't been entirely his choice. The knowledge that he had fought to find her, had ridden into battle to protect her, had sat by her bedside for 3 days waiting for her to wake. It didn't erase the pain. Nothing could erase months of humiliation and heartbreak. But it changed things. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said finally, honestly. Not yet. The words still echo in my head. The loneliness still lives in my bones. Even knowing about the curse, even understanding why it happened, I can't just forget. I'm not asking you to forget. Calem's voice was fierce in its sincerity. I'm asking for a chance, a real chance, without curses or manipulation or lies. Let me show you who I am now. Let me earn your trust. Let me prove that the moments of warmth you glimpsed were the truth, and everything else was the corruption. And if you can't, if too much damage has been done, then at least our child will know its father tried. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a tenderness that made her heart ache. At least I'll know I didn't give up. Whatever happens between us, Seren, I will never stop trying to be worthy of you. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had been her husband in name only. This man who had broken her heart with words that weren't truly his own. This man who had ridden across kingdoms to save her, who had fought a witch while dying from a curse, who had sat by her bedside for 3 days praying for her to wake. He was flawed. He was damaged. He was scarred by years of corruption that couldn't be undone overnight. But he was trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin. One chance, she said quietly. One chance to show me who you really are. But Calem, she met his eyes, letting him see the steel beneath her softness. If you ever make me feel worthless again, curse or no curse, I will take our child and disappear so completely that not even the gods will find us. I understand. He nodded, something like hope kindling in his gaze. I swear it, Seren. On my crown, my kingdom, my life. I will never make you regret giving me this chance. It took another week before Seren was strong enough to travel. Calem never left her side. He was there when she woke each morning, bringing her breakfast himself rather than summoning servants. He was there through the long afternoons, reading to her from books he'd brought from Valdris, discussing politics and philosophy and the future of the kingdom. He was there in the evenings, sitting by her bed as the sun set, telling her stories of his childhood before the curse, the warm memories he was only now able to access again. And slowly, so slowly, Seren began to see him. Not the cold king who had dismissed her, not the cruel husband who had mocked her to his mistress, but the man beneath, emerging from years of ice like a flower pushing through snow. He was intelligent, curious, surprisingly funny when he relaxed enough to joke. He loved his kingdom fiercely, worried about his people constantly, and spoke of his hopes for their child with a wonder that brought tears to her eyes. This was the man she had glimpsed in stolen moments, the man she had hoped existed, the man she could, perhaps, learn to love. 4 months later, the Queen of Valdres gave birth to a daughter. They named her Aurelia, for the golden light that had saved them all. She had her father's pale hair and her mother's dark eyes, and a cry so powerful it made the midwives laugh with delight. "A strong one," Isolde declared, placing the infant in Seren's arms. "She'll rule this kingdom someday, and the gods help anyone who stands in her way." Caleb stood beside the bed, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. He reached out with trembling fingers to touch his daughter's cheek, and Aurelia immediately grabbed hold of him, her tiny fist closing around his finger. "She's perfect," he breathed. "Seren, she's absolutely perfect." "She is." Seren smiled, exhaustion and joy mingling in her chest. Our daughter. Our daughter." The words seemed to fill him with wonder. "I never thought, after everything, after the curse, I never imagined I could feel this much. This love, this overwhelming." He shook his head, unable to finish. Seren understood. The curse had stolen his ability to feel for so long. Now, with it broken, every emotion hit him with staggering intensity. She'd watched him weep at sunsets, laugh at small jokes, rage at injustice with a passion that startled his courtiers. He was learning to feel again. And she was learning to trust again. It hadn't been easy. The months since her recovery had been filled with difficult conversations, painful admissions, and moments when old wounds reopened without warning. There were nights when Seren still woke from dreams of his cruel laughter, still heard those terrible words echoing in her mind. But there were other nights, too. Nights when Caleb held her close and whispered apologies against her hair. Nights when they talked until dawn, learning each other properly for the first time. Nights when he touched her with such reverent tenderness that she forgot to be afraid. He had kept his promise. Every day, in ways large and small, he had worked to earn her trust. He had involved her in council meetings, valued her opinions, and treated her as an equal partner rather than a treaty obligation. He had publicly acknowledged Ravenna's deception, cleared Seren's name of the lies the witch had spread, and made it clear to the entire kingdom that their queen was to be honored and respected. And when the court had whispered about the strangeness of their marriage, about the queen who had fled and the king who had chased her, Caleb had stood before them all and told the truth. "I was cursed," he had said, his voice carrying through the great hall. "For 5 years, dark magic corrupted my mind and froze my heart. It made me cruel. It made me cold. It made me drive away the woman I should have cherished." He had turned to look at Seren, seated beside him with her hand resting on her growing belly. "My queen saved me, not just from the witch who cursed me, but from the monster I had become. She is the strongest person I have ever known, and I am honored beyond words to call her my wife." The court had erupted in applause, and Seren had felt something loosen in her chest. Something that had been wound tight since the night she fled. Maybe this could work. Maybe they could build something real from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Now, watching Caleb hold their daughter for the first time, Seren knew they had succeeded. "I want to do things differently," Caleb said softly, cradling Aurelia with exquisite care. "I want her to grow up in a warm home, a loving home. I want her to know that she matters, that she's wanted, every single day of her life. She will." Seren reached out, covering his hand with hers. "We'll make sure of it." He looked up at her, his eyes shining. "I love you, Seren. I know I've said it before, but I need you to understand. This isn't the curse speaking. This isn't obligation or duty or politics. This is me, the real me, loving you with everything I have." Seren's heart swelled. It had taken time, months of patience, of healing, of choosing each day to move forward instead of back. But she had found it at last. The love she had hoped for when she first traveled north. The partnership she had dreamed of when she married a stranger king. It had come through fire and ice, through betrayal and redemption, through the darkest night and into the dawn. But it had come. "I love you too," she said, The real you, the man you were always meant to be. Caleb leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and warm, with their daughter cradled between them. The kingdom of Valdris flourished in the years that followed. Seren established a healing academy, training young practitioners in the old arts, ensuring that gifts like hers would never again be suppressed or hidden. Caleb reformed the laws that had allowed corruption to fester, created councils where common people could voice their concerns, and worked tirelessly to heal the wounds that Ravenna's influence had inflicted. Aurelia grew strong and bright, a princess beloved by her people, with her father's determination and her mother's compassion. She was joined in time by a brother, Brennan, named for the old healer who had first confirmed Seren's pregnancy and inadvertently set the rescue in motion. And in the castle that had once felt like a prison, warmth finally made its home. Seren would sometimes stand at her window, watching the sun set over the kingdom that had become truly hers. She would remember the night she fled, the desperation and heartbreak and fear. She would remember the woman she had been, broken and hopeless and alone, and she would marvel at how far she had come. "You're thinking again." Caleb's arms slipped around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. He was warm now, always warm, the ice that had gripped him nothing but a distant memory. "I'm remembering," she corrected. "The night I left. What I heard you say." He tensed slightly, the old guilt never quite fading. "I wish I could erase those words from existence." "Don't." She turned in his arms, cupping his face in her hands. "If I hadn't heard them, I wouldn't have left. I wouldn't have discovered the truth about Ravenna. I wouldn't have found my strength, my gift, my purpose." She smiled. "Those terrible words led me to everything I have now." "That's a generous interpretation. It's the truth." She kissed him softly. "We can't change the past. We can only shape the future. And our future." She glanced back at the kingdom spread before them, golden in the evening light. "Our future is beautiful." Caleb held her close, his chin resting on her head, his heart beating steady against her back. "I never deserved you," he murmured. "No," she agreed cheerfully. "You didn't. But you earned me. Day by day, choice by choice, you earned the right to stand beside me. And I'll keep earning it. Every day. For the rest of our lives." Seren smiled, leaning into his warmth, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. She had walked away before dawn, carrying nothing but heartbreak and hope, and she had found everything she never knew she needed. A kingdom, a family, a love that had been forged in fire and ice and emerged stronger than either. She never looked back. She didn't need to. The future was bright enough to light the way forward. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. Your support means everything, and I always love hearing which moments touched you most. Until next time.